preservation of and increased access to the 92nd Street Y Humanities Audio Archives is generously funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities.
We're really delighted we have Elizabeth Swados with us. She's discussing Flamboyant, and of course Dr. Margot Krebs is back to facilitate our discussion. Two program notes. The first is that Elizabeth is actually going to be back with us tomorrow night for a program called the February Film Forum. We're going to be showing the 1997 documentary Jewish Soul, American Beat, in which Elizabeth is interviewed. And afterwards, there's going to be a panel discussion with Elizabeth and some of the other people who were interviewed in the film. Ann Royfee is going to be with us, Ephraim Buchwald, Arthur Hertzberg, and Reb Moshe Waldox. And I want to remind you that our next meeting is not for a little while, April 9th. Martha Cooley is going to be with us. She's a new author. We are discussing The Archivist, so I hope you will join us. And thank you for being with us tonight.
Thanks, Ariel. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for coming out on such a cold night. I really appreciate having you here. And I'd like to welcome Elizabeth Swados. And I'm sorry, I always pronounced your name Swados. I didn't
But you
realize.
did it right. You just did it right.
Did I do it right?
Swados, yeah.
Swados now. Yeah. All right. Well, Elizabeth Swados is a Renaissance woman. She's a novelist, a composer, a playwright, a director. Have I missed anything?
Depends on the day.
So, in fact, I was going to ask you, are you all those things equally, would you say?
It depends. I'm not being facetious when I say it depends on the year, really, what I'm focusing on. I'm not as focused right now on a novel. I'm very focused on the theater right now. Last year I was very focused on finishing a novel. It just depends on what I'm doing when.
And you're happy with all these different media?
I like doing them. Whether I'm happy with the product, it depends.
Well, Flamboyant is a novel that raises all kinds of questions. Questions about theology, questions about love, questions about responsibility, guilt, ethics, and of course questions about gender and race. It is told in diary form in parallel tracks. Chana Landau is a 28-year-old Orthodox woman who was sent to teach at the Harvey Milk High School for gay students in Manhattan. Flamboyant, aka Sarah, aka Yosef, a 15-year-old male prostitute transvestite, is a student at the school. The school, of course, is named for Harvey Milk, who was a gay activist in San Francisco who was shot and killed in 1979. Through their journal entries, we become engaged in, I guess, an unlikely relationship between Chana and her student. And I wonder if you could tell us what you think draws them to one another.
Well, I mean, I don't know, and that's the point. I mean, there's a thing that Carson McCullers says in The Ballad of the Sad Cafe. She says, love is a joint experience between two people, but the fact that it is a joint experience, something like it, doesn't mean that it's similar for the two people involved. First there's the lover, and then there's the beloved, but these two come from different countries. And I think that basically it's learning about the different ways you can love. And I think that what happens between the two of them is something that is mysterious, and that's what makes it wonderful. I think it's hard not to love Flamboyant if you're as wonderful as Chana is.
You know, in a way, what struck me in the description, Chana is petite and pure and proper and feminine, and Flamboyant, in her own way or his own way, also is petite and pure and proper and pensive and feminine and so on. And I found that interesting, the parallels between them.
Also, I think that one of the things that attracts them to each other is the lie. Because at least I think that I mean, I know from experience that if you're teaching in a classroom and there's a transvestite who is a perfect girl, you still, something, you know, you don't know what it is, but you're drawn to it because it's not exactly what it is. And Chana is this very religious, very stern, and yet underneath she's this feisty, stubborn little character who dreams and who, you know, and maybe Flamboyant senses that. So it's also that they feel that you can sense when somebody isn't what they say they are. Mm-hmm. I think that attracts them too, that draws them together.
Interesting. So Chana, I think, in the relationship grows in compassion as she opens her rigid world to the strange, what are called hybrids at the Harvey Milk School. And although she is supposed to be the teacher, I always feel that it is her Bildungsroman that we are reading. Because there is such a change that goes on in her.
There's another aspect that's very, very important to me in the book, which is that Chana learns how to teach. And Flamboyant also teaches. And through Martin, who's the head of the school, you know, I wanted to show that you can really teach kids in ways that aren't, even doing the Tom Lehrer song for chemistry, mm-hmm. you know, you can do whatever you have to do if you want young people to learn. And Chana, instead of going do, 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 she learns that there's other ways to communicate. And Flamboyant learns to accept her more steadfast way of thinking. That's another thing that happens.
Now, Chana is torn because she feels she really should not be there. And at first she stays, she persists because her father needs her financial help. And obviously if she quit the school, she would make things so much easier for herself in terms of her relationship with her fiance and his family and the whole community, and yet she stays. What's wrong with what she's doing?
Well, first of all, let me just say, so I'm right out front, there was a teacher at the Harvey Milk School, and there was an article in the New York Times Magazine about this woman who sounded absolutely remarkable to me, but there was no problem. You know, there was nothing. But I went, what if she was a different person? And what if she really, her whole family was against it? The problem being that in the Orthodox, well, in a lot of the Jewish community, being gay, particularly, well, I won't say particularly men, I would say anybody being gay, is against the interpretations of the writings, the laws. And Chana is an extremely religious woman. She represents to me partially some of the women that I know who are somewhat feminist in that they are really trying to get women involved in the rituals of Judaism. But on the other hand, they're traditional in that they are still balancing what is true and what is not in terms of the interpretations of the laws. So she represents that to me, and I think she's struggling with that. I mean, I think she's like trying to figure out what's true, what's not true, because a woman like that is I mean, I'm not an expert, but I did do a lot of talking to people, is brought up, you know, this is this, this is this, this is this, and you don't question.
But now she herself is not gay. So what is wrong with teaching in a school, teaching gay children English?
Well, to be in the company of children who are, let's say, lascivious. I mean, if you teach it at some place like the Harvey Milk School, the kids take off their clothes. They test you all the time. They take off their clothes. They talk, you know, unbelievably. They put on their makeup. One of the things, you could be in the middle of saying, you know, okay, well, drama is a wonderful thing. You'll see someone putting on their makeup, a guy, you know, and for me, you know, that's like a day in my life, right? But for someone like Chana, that's like, well, is she is she in some way supporting behavior that's wrong, that's immoral? Is she in some way becoming impure by associating herself and by listening to and by taking on the ways and even enjoying, right, the ways of these drag queens and butch dykes and all this stuff? You know, she is fascinated by it, and I think that bothers her.
Right, she says at one point, at the Harvey Milk School, I was as close to Sodom as I thought I'd ever be. But there's no telling where or how you'll find paradise.
Right.
She says that early on in her journal.
Well, because that's her problem, is that she understands that there's a beauty in all of this pain, and that there's a beauty in being different, and that there's a legitimacy to anyone who's a good soul. You know, that's what troubles her, I think.
But at first, I think she, it seems to me, would have to define this paradise as an opportunity to do mitzvot.
Right. Right. I think that it's such a mess. These kids are like, they are so blatantly a mess and wacko that it would be like to a teacher if you know, had taken enough coffee in the morning. It would be like, yes, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to give you whatever I can, you know. So yes, she could be very, you know, evangelist, excuse the expression, but she could be about it all.
So the novel seems to be saying that the road to this paradise is paved with all kinds of obstacles and challenges and even contradictions, because her fiancé Avi says, I don't think a Jew should compromise his morality to do a mitzvah. I don't think a Jew should voluntarily participate in wrongful behavior in the name of some greater good. So is that one of the questions that you raise in the novel?
Well, I don't purposely raise any moral questions. I don't. I'm not trying to argue anything. I'm trying to help this kid come to terms with what he or she is. I'm trying to help Hannah come to terms with what she is and what she tolerates and what she won't tolerate. And I'm trying to help Avi keep his girl without falling apart, and you know, and that's really how I work. You know, I don't think, well, now the moral question is going to be blah blah blah. You know, I really think, okay, well, this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and somebody's going to think this way, and somebody's going to, and all kinds of entanglements evolve. Truly.
Mm-hmm. When Flamboyant runs away, she writes in her journal about Hannah, you had no question that your job was to find me, for although Judaism forbade it, Judaism also dictated it. I found that very interesting. And
well, you know, I think that's something that's very important, because to do good, you know, to do good for a kid or for anybody who's needy, that sort of follows the, you know, the mitzvah, right? Mm-hmm. To follow through for a lifetime, that's kind of not written into what you're supposed to do. But in fact, if you're going to take on a kid like this, you have to be there for the lifetime, or the kid's going to just fall apart with separation.
So there's a very poignant moment when Hannah is standing at Yad Vashem. It actually comes towards the end of the novel when she goes to Israel. She says, I wanted to stop Flamboyant from turning into a freak. I wanted to give her a reason not to kill herself. Here I was, staying much too long in a place that memorialized children who'd been forced into untimely, horrific deaths just because they were Jews. And I was using this sacred time to meditate on a living child who wasted her life addicted to deadly games. Either I was very far from the point or right on it.
Well, it's all of that. I mean, Flamboyant isn't 100% let's not say to every kid, go and be a 14-year-old mixed-race transvestite and you'll have a great life because this book is telling you, yeah. You know, that's not the point. This is a kid who has enormous pain, but is also an enormous pain in the ass. And the selfishness of this particular kind of stuff that this kid goes through could grate her, could make her mad, because she's not, none of us are saints. She could get mad about what this kid is doing. On the other hand, she could get mad at herself for being in this place memorializing children who are dead when there's a kid who could be getting dead that she's not doing anything about. So it's like what I said. It's one of the things about this book is that nothing is one layer. Nothing is one interpretation. That's the whole point. That's why you never know what the road to paradise is.
And of course, there's a metaphor there too. The nothing being what it appears, and everything being layered.
Right, and also that the world that the Jewish laws were written for, in terms of if you interpret them more literally, is not the world that exists now. They don't apply to going into a school of extremely troubled children, who are going to make themselves naked the second that they can, or do all kinds of things. It doesn't apply. It's trying to. That's one of the things I've learned from my gay friends who are Jews, and from my feminist friends and all that, is that you have to look at the laws, all of them, and you have to find a way into them that fits what your situation is. You can't take an interpretation in, or you may as well not just do. Don't do the thing. Don't teach.
From the beginning, Chana is challenged in her religious world. So she thinks that she has found this gem in her new student, whom she calls by the name of Sarah. And I'd like to read a fairly long passage here because I think it's very interesting. Sarah is a beautiful name, you said carefully. Now, this is Flamboyant journal entry, but obviously, and we'll talk in a moment about why these particular points of view. This is Flamboyant's journal entry. Sarah is a beautiful name, you said, meaning Chana. You said carefully. She is one of the bravest and wisest women in the Bible. She's tough, too. She had to go through a lot. She had to wait many years for what she wanted most. Without Sarah, there would be no Isaac, no laughter. And you know what else? I looked at you, you were on a roll, teaching out of control. You grinned, your teeth had a gap. When Sarah first was with Abraham asked her if she would go into the harem of the enemy. Abraham asked her to be the concubine to Pharaoh so his life could be saved. Sarah did it. That was pretty brave. I waited a beat. Wow, I said, trying to act humble. But I was annoyed. I hated when adults used metaphysical warfare to commit therapy on me. She could be rude and racist, I sniffed. Sarah slapped Hagar, the poor slave girl, who Sarah herself chose to be her surrogate mother. First you blinked, then you clapped your little hands together and laughed. The contradictions in the Bible, you said, reflect the imperfections in ourselves. It's a way of understanding human behavior. I'm sure Sarah regretted what she did. She was sorry she slapped Hagar. And God forgave her, I asked? You shrugged. You were in over your head. God forgives everyone, you said. That's why he's God. You said God forgives everyone, I told you. I wondered, did he forgive the Nazis? Does he forgive skinheads when they stomp a faggot to death with their combat boots? Does God forgive truckers for throwing girls out of their cabs, going 75 miles an hour? I was just being philosophical, but you were blushing. 2 deep red spots soaked your white cheeks. Red fingers crawled up from your high-collared blouse. After a while, you looked up at me, your eyes leaked. I don't know if I'm up to this. A choking sound caught your voice in your throat. I felt a rush of goodwill. It was an easy victory. but a satisfying one. You excused yourself and went to the ladies' room to lick God's wounds. When you returned, you seemed more laid back. Maybe you had one of those Secret Service watches on your wrist and you talked to God from the toilet. So, this narrative voice of flamboyant allows for some pretty brutal questions. Where is God when human beings are cruel to one another? Or as flamboyant asks, if God hates freaks, why did he make them? And it occurred to me to ask you the question, if flamboyant asked you, how would you answer?
I'd know that flamboyant was testing me, and I'd say, what do you think? No, I'm serious.
But
because,
that's what every
because
teacher
the whole
does.
because the whole point of that exchange, though it may represent certain philosophical questions, the whole point is how he nails her. It's how he sort of figures out what her game is. So the first thing I would say probably is, do you think that I'm telling you this Sarah story, just to sort of get your back up, just to sort of, tell you a story that will give you some help? And do you resent that? I would say, am I being stupid? That's what I say with kids. I tell them, blah, 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 and then I say, am I being stupid? Is this like really a stupid thing I'm doing, like trying to write rap music? And they'll go, mm-hmm. In this case, she's not experienced yet. It shows her inexperience. In effect, I believe, as the writer, that she deserves what she got. And that flamboyant isn't really asking that question. He's saying, have you ever heard of the dirty dozens? The dozens where you outdo each other, right? Flamboyant is going, your turn, and she goes, The question itself is, of course, impossible to me. I mean, I don't know how to answer that. It's completely not possible to give, especially to a young person. I would never say yes or no, never. But what I'm trying to say to you is that it's much different than asking those questions. It's a duel that she loses, and he feels very good about that.
You don't think flamboyant really wants the answer?
Yes.
He does.
Of course he does. Yeah, but that's not the agenda. He'd like to know, but he knows she's not going to be able to come up with it. He would be shocked if she actually said something that blew his mind at that moment. I know him.
So Martin is the gay principal
right.
of the Harvey Milk School. He's a rabbi by training, and he says two such contradictory ways of living cannot exist simultaneously. Let's see, page 129. I spent my teenage years, he says, studying Torah and despising my dreams. I stuck with the faith because it's in my blood and bones. My ancestors probably loathe me because I won't supply them with progeny, but such are the ironies of Jewish queens. And, I'm reminded of Trembling Before God.
I was just thinking about that. That came out after Flamboyant. And the thing about Trembling Before God, which troubled me, was that, although it was a very moving film and very important, it was so down. It was like there was no relief. Whereas the people that I knew that taught gay students who were gay men, they loved it. They got life from it. They knew why they were alive. And this was their alternative to being able to go to a straight shul and do, in good conscience what the straight guys were doing. They found their way, you know what I mean? And the thing that I like about Martin is that he's sort of together. He's by putting this school on the map, by taking these kids in, by finding his own way of being a rabbi downtown, or in my head that's where it was, or whatever, he has healed himself, you know? And I think in Trembling Before God, you know, there's so much unremitting pain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for Martin, as well as for Flamboyant, it seems to be about accepting oneself. And Flamboyant says, I became a hybrid and chose to stay a hybrid because the tension between male and female was vibrant. Your choice of the word hybrid. It has, I believe, and I'm not all that learned, but it has, I believe, resonances within the Orthodox tradition. Can you discuss this?
Beats me. What are they?
Well, I believe that there is some injunction about producing products that are mixed. I can't go further than that because maybe there's someone in the room who can. That's the extent of my knowledge on the subject. But I thought that perhaps you were driving at something there.
I know the kids who are different, black and white mix, black and Puerto Rican mix, but all the different mixes. I know that there's an enormous amount of pain over that and discrimination, that there's something about not being one thing that is very wrong inside of a young person, and that's really, why I use the word hybrid.
Why do we have that problem? What is there in that notion, in that concept?
Well, I mean, in Judaism, right, everything is one, right? One God, monotheism, it's all that. So the idea of having two selves is not too comfortable. I think in life it's very hard to be two things because you contradict yourself and you don't know where you are. If one day you're a guy and one day you're a girl, all your wishes, all your dreams, all your thoughts, they go different. How you wear your clothes, you have two wardrobes, you have two sets of CDs that you listen to. It's like everything is. Who are you in the midst of all that? You don't come together as one thing, so you don't have one life or one set of tastes.
But Flamboyant and Martin seem to be saying that you can.
Well, Flamboyant and Martin are two very different people.
Okay.
Martin seems to be on his way to finding a coming together that blends as one. Flamboyant is still, he's nowhere by the end of this book. He's just starting out. What he has at the end of the book that he didn't have at the beginning is hope and love. But a solution, I don't think he has.
But it's not a very realistic hope. I mean, what is he hoping? He is hoping that, it's said very beautifully. And then maybe every Saturday from that day on, I took the train. He's imagining what life will look like. And then maybe every Saturday from that day on, I took the train to Brooklyn and walked the quiet tree-lined streets with the crooked sidewalks and fat cars and small driveways. And the early morning was cool, the light a calm, pale yellow. So far, so good. I walked up three stone steps of your synagogue, and then I turned to the right and climbed the wooden stairs to the wooden balcony. I was dressed in a navy silk skirt and jacket. The skirt was pleated and so on and so forth. And then he goes off into his love of his costume. Of course, the women turned and glared at me, rolled their eyes at each other, stopped, reconsidered, and then patted the empty seats on the wooden benches.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Have you ever worked with very, very at-risk, troubled kids?
No, I haven't.
Okay. One of the best things you can give a kid who's on the edge is the right to dream. And the material to dream without punishment, meaning that there's a possibility that there's a place they could go to. There's a possibility that there's a person that they could look at, you know? There's a possibility that there'll be someone to love them, and that's really true. So then within that, they go woo all over the place. Sometimes they get in more trouble, sometimes they do okay, but without that possibility, which is given from love and from freedom, the imagination stays imprisoned and the kid dies. So the hope is that he has the freedom to dream about being loved in a situation that maybe it's not going to turn out that way, but it doesn't matter. He's working now. He's dreaming now. You know, he's not dreaming about getting blown off by a guy in a truck and getting beaten up because that will make him feel good. You know, his dreams are changing.
So that's a healthy dream.
It's a very healthy dream. It's a very healthy dream. Why shouldn't he care about his nice navy blue suit?
Oh, no. Yeah, he can care about the beautiful pleated skirt and all that.
Yeah.
But can he dream about taking his place with the women in the balcony in the synagogue?
You know, times change. You never know. What synagogue is it? If it's a gay synagogue downtown in Soho, then he's fine.
Right.
You know, if it's
wouldn't have a balcony, I suspect.
Yeah. But I mean, you know, that's not the point. The point is it's not that he's dreaming about he wants that. The point is that he's dreaming about love and religion and acceptance, and he'll rewrite it his own way. I didn't want him to, it would be completely unrealistic to suddenly have him, you know, nail what he's going to be, who he's going to do, how he's going to do it. He's still wacko.
Still.
He's still whacked at the end of
you expect that he will stop being wacko at some point?
I expect that he will behave in a way that hurts himself less as time goes on, and find behavior that will keep him alive and keep him clean and keep him probably productive on some level, because he won't want to kill himself. And I think that's what that dream reflects more than anything. You can't expect too much.
Okay, let's turn to Chana for a moment.
Okay.
So her journal begins with appropriate quotations, often from Deuteronomy or Leviticus, books of laws in the Hebrew Bible. And I was wondering if you could explain the relationship between, you know, the quote, "we are studying," and the narrative in that particular journal entry.
Well, name one. Show me a journal entry, and you know,
in any given journal,
because they all
is there a relationship?
Yes, there is.
Really what I'm asking. So let's look at.
I mean, that's a big thing anyway that she's studying, because she's already beginning to, you know, instead of just being a good girl, she's looking at these things in a different way, because her experience in life is making her look at the words differently.
For example. This is,
what page?
Do you have the same? I guess it's the same, 59?
59.
We study Deuteronomy. Quote, "And when we cried unto the Lord God of our fathers, the Lord heard our voice and looked on our affliction and our labor and our oppression." And then the chapter begins, "It was a lucky thing that Avi and I didn't see each other every day," etc.
Well, but the part of the chapter is that she starts to see the pain of the kids. And she starts to see that they're not just bad kids, but that they're slaves to their family troubles. So that's what that's about. So yeah, every quote has some.
So can we do this a little bit? Because
yeah,
I think it'll be very
do it again.
interesting. Let's do it again. This is earlier, the 9th of Elul after Havdalah, she writes.
What page?
Deuteronomy, sorry. Page 21, 22, 23. There shall be no whore of the daughters of Israel, nor a sodomite of the sons of Israel.
Well, it's the beginning of saying, okay, it seems to me that, I mean, she doesn't know this, but the chapter the quote says, I'm not going to be the same daughter of Israel, and you aren't going to be the same sodomite. It's like preview, you know, in the movies, up on the screen. The clip is no more daughter of Israel, no more sodomite. Into Harvey Milk. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Boom. You know.
So sometimes there aren't quotes.
Yes.
But here's one. I like this one. Page 125. We prepare, and this is from Genesis. And Isaac spake unto Abraham his father and said, My father. And he said, Here am I, my son. And he said, Behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering?
You know what's funny? This is the uncorrected proofs, you know, that I had way before the book came out. And it says, here am I, my son. And he said, Behold the girl and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? I swear, it's really weird. I think that this is the beginning of it's her test. You know, it's her really coming up against the fact that she loved this, she thought, beautiful little girl, and now he's a boy, right? And this is it. Does she abandon him, or does she follow through? You know, I think it's bigger than that, but that's sort of it.
Right.
And I don't know what the girl is doing in this one.
So twice she makes reference to this concept of separation in Judaism, whether it's Shabbat from the rest of the week with the Havdalah service, or whether in the following prayer, Praised be thou, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who created the distinction of the holy and the profane, between light and darkness, between Israel and the nations. Thou hast distinguished and sanctified thy people. Praised be thou, O Lord, who made a distinction between the sacred and the profane.
Well, I mean, I'm not a scholar, so I'm treading on I tried very hard to make the stuff come from characters and be, I'm not a scholar, but what I was trying to do there is to show that in Judaism, the concept of this and this is extremely important. So therefore, flamboyant being a little bit of this and a little bit of that would be extremely contrary to what the religion, what the basic literature of the religion gives us. That's one thing. And the other was to praise Chana and Flamboyánt. So it has a negative and a positive thing, that Chana can be, you know what I mean, that they're extremely separate, and so they maybe can go together.
So how much work did you have to do in your use of biblical texts?
I had to do an enormous amount of work. But really, I have been a composer most of my life, and I've set an enormous amount of biblical texts to music, so I'm pretty familiar with stuff. So it wasn't as hard as making sure that the interpretations were, not faulty, that I wasn't misusing them. I got vetted by several rabbis, and also the Yiddish was looked over. I didn't go into this, without being extremely careful. Everything I got, I chose myself, and I applied it in my own way. And then I had some rabbis. I lived down the street from HUC, so it was easy. I could just walk in the lobby and say, you know.
Your own background, the Yiddish proverbs, for example, I mean, they're wonderful. There are just so many of them, and they're transliterated so beautifully.
I worked really hard on. I mean, I called every aunt, great aunt, you know, everybody I knew. I looked at books. And then I had it checked by the head of Yiddish, the Yiddish language program, I think, at Jewish Theological Seminary. I think that's what I did. I think that's who it was. But I really made sure, because I knew I was going to get. I remember I did this show called The Haggadah. It was the first Jewish show I did. And I was doing all kinds of stuff with that. And I remember before it went on, before the public came, I had cantors in there, rabbis in there. I had people making sure, you know, because if you're going to put yourself on the edge, you have to be correct. You know, if you're going to, you have to be technically correct. So I was very careful.
And did you run into any problems?
No.
That's great.
No. I mean, some people, of course, didn't agree with me, but they said it was right. Mm-hmm. The writing was right, mm-hmm. but they didn't like the premise.
Mm-hmm. But I thought that this all came naturally, but no. Okay.
That's the joy of writing a book, is that you go into a whole new world every time you do it. Mm-hmm. You know, you become a different person. It's like studying a role in acting. You know, you're like an amphibian. You know, you go from the land into whatever, you know, you really have to study it. You know who's really good at that are mystery writers. Man, the amount of material that they absorb, you know, about weapons and blood and forensic, you know, I admire them very much for that. I could never remember all that stuff.
So, is there a happy ending to the story? Well, Avi and Chana go off to consult this rabbi in Israel. I'm sorry, I just find it very funny, because they end up hanging out there for God knows how long, waiting for this answer. And the answer that they get, wait a second, let me find it, is, it's precious, really. He kind of says, so what's the problem? So let me put it this way, the Rebbe said. You put all the books of learning, hundreds of pounds of pages on one side of the scale, and Hannah's soul on the other. And her soul far outweighed the books. And Avi says, yes. And that's it.
Well, the whole thing is the waiting. Because, like, I've been through that. Because of being a research fiend, I did a piece actually here on Esther. This is just one example of 12 million. And I wanted to have an answer to the question, why is God's name not mentioned in the book of Esther? If I didn't get that solved, there was no way I was going to be able to do this show. So I found this Hasidic, some kind of mega ampha sigma Rebbe extraordinaire.
He spoke to you?
Huh?
And he spoke to you?
Well, it took a lot of negotiation, and then I went out there, and I had to have dinner, I had to listen to this, I had to do that, and I swear to you, finally, after hours, he said, so what's your question? And I said, my question is, why is the name of God not written in the book of Esther? And he sat there for a minute and he said, well, why is it in all the other books? And I thought, bullshit artist of the century, right? But I deserved it. So, and I've had a million things like that in Israel, because I'm always so earnestly, because I do all these Bible shows, and I always fall into stuff like that. And there's a I had an experience very close to that, waiting all day for somebody, and so what he ends up saying at the end is like almost like, we know that. It's the fact that they waited and that they went there and that they went on the plane and they stayed at the hotel and they kissed in the, and then finally, right?
And they learn in the process.
Yeah, it's that doing it is the thing.
And so Avi, who is a very earnest young man, speaks to his bride and quotes from the Ethics of the Fathers. He used to say, "He whose wisdom exceeds his good deeds, to what is he like? To a tree of many branches and few roots, and the wind comes and uproots it and overturns it. As it is written, he shall be like a lonely tree in the desert, and he shall not see the coming of good. He shall inhabit the dry places of the wilderness, a salty land, and uninhabited. But she whose good deeds exceed her wisdom, to what is she like? To a tree of few branches and many roots, so that even if all the winds of the world blow upon it, they will not stir it from its place. As it is written, and she shall be like a tree planted by the waters, that spreads its roots by a stream. It does not see the coming of the heat, its leaf is evergreen. It is untroubled in a year of drought, and does not cease from bearing fruit." And Hannah points out, Avi had changed the he in the second half of the passage to she. This was the beginning of a hope. Or, as Flamboyant would call it, gender bender theology. So there certainly seems to be happy ending in this humanistic orthodoxy. And you spoke to us about the happy ending for Flamboyant, because you see, I didn't see it, and I'm glad you explained it to me.
I think that anybody, part of my campaign in my life has been for people to understand kids, not as adult renditions or TV movies of the week or bad, R-rated movies or whatever, but that they're complicated, and that what you try to do, both with troubled kids and not so troubled kids, is you try to find a reality, really, of expectation. And in fact, to abandon expectation and to look at what's in front of you and to work to see that. Instead of saying you look and you see, okay, right? You know that if he's in a car, having sex with a violent person, you look at that and you say, I look at that, I don't see him doing anything for himself, right? You look at him and you see him dreaming about a neighborhood of someone that he loves, that exists for him, that's there for him. Doesn't he send a kiss to Avi from the balcony? He does. Yeah, I think he takes in the Avi as well, and he's sitting with the women, and okay, so that's Flamboyant. So you look and you say, okay, that's Flamboyant's version of feeling like, there's something else he can do. I could have him wishing that he was opening a beauty parlor or, being the best dressed transvestite in a French fashion show. But Flamboyant wants love. And that's what he's touching at that moment, to me.
Questions, comments, join us.
I wanted
Yes.
to thank you, because I like that I felt grounded at the end of the book in a sort of peaceful way, that even though there was much pain going on, everybody was a hybrid. They were all a new creation that really became a new being. So in that sense, it was very delightful, and I thank you for connecting. It really was one. Even Hannah, everybody was one. Became a new hybrid in their thought. So
That's nice.
Yeah, I like that.
That's nice.
I like that.
I wish you worked for the New York Times.
Other comments, questions?
I wanted to know how adolescents who have read this have reacted.
How?
Adolescents?
Well, my kids that I had to give this to because they would have said, girl, if I didn't, went, they loved it. White Jewish kids, sons and daughters of my friends, the few that read it, were kind of, yeah, flamboyant's cool, yeah. It was like it didn't matter very much. Gay kids were happy that it was written, boys more than girls. I didn't show it to a whole lot of people. I just showed it basically to friends' kids and the kids that I knew I had to show it to. Particularly there was a kid, there's Flamboyant, and then there's a kid, I forget what his name is, Clarence? Gerard, yeah, he was Clarence in another draft. I had to show it to Gerard.
He's a wonderful character. What made you decide on the narrative structure here with these dual journal entries?
Well, the pleasure of being able to write in transvestite lingo mixed with adolescent stuff was more than I could resist. I mean, it was pleasure to create Flamboyant because I don't get to talk like that, but I get to hear it all the time. So I really wanted to, I just wanted to be there, So I knew that I had to do that. And I knew that I couldn't write the whole book in that voice because, it's a limited voice. He's troubled and he only sees things a certain way and he needs to be, right? So I always knew that it was going to be a teacher that he got with. So I was terrified, but I knew that that there had to be a similar voice of the teacher. And that worried me because I didn't want it to be whiny, that in her own way, she was as innocent as he was. So, and then I got less worried about it, and I did it. But the choice for the form is because I really wanted to write Flamboyant.
And you actually wrote it in the order in which we read it, so you were alternating voices?
Yeah.
So that must have been rather difficult to do.
It was hard.
I mean, just assuming a different persona each time you sat down to write.
Yeah, well, helping Flamboyant, all I had to do was walk downtown. With Chana, basically I read the Bible, or I read prayer books or stuff like that just to get myself into another head.
So do you feel that you did equal justice to the 2 points of view?
No. If there's one agenda that I had, it was not to support the prejudice and incredibly painful behavior on the part of parents of gay Jewish kids. I wasn't about to justify it too much. I tried to make it not horrible, but no. I can't say that I did.
Well, I actually found Chana's father amazingly tolerant and sympathetic. Now, I don't know where he came from for you, but what was interesting to me also was that several times you mentioned his calloused hands. This was a man who I think worked with his hands, who worked with his body, who he was not he didn't have the middle class pretensions of her in-laws.
Right.
But you seem to like him a lot.
I loved him. Totally came out of my head. I wish I knew somebody like that. I mean, he was like my Uncle Joe, who's been dead for like years, 30 years. I don't know what my Uncle Joe would think of Flamboyant, but I imagined,
So was
you go all kinds of places when you're writing a book. I mean, I do. I just here, there, wherever. Yeah.
Was there a reason that Chana's mother was dead?
Well, a motherless woman tends to have to, I'm generalizing here, but what I felt was that if her mother was dead, she would be more apt to make her own decisions and get herself in trouble. I don't know why I felt that. I mean, my mother's dead. She's been dead for a long time, so maybe that's what it was. But I know that if you don't have a mother that you can go, you have a tendency to go, you know.
Her mother-in-law is an interesting character. I mean, she's largely obnoxious, but there is a scene in which they smoke together.
Right.
And you say, oh boy, this woman actually has some humanity.
Oh, yeah.
Because of this little transgression of hers. So did you think that there might be possibility in that relationship?
Yes.
They
absolutely.
open up to one another?
I don't think that anybody, just because they're snooty, isn't possibly a person. I just think that they take more work. I mean, I've met women like that. I had an aunt like that, and underneath it, if you can get to that place, they really want to be loose, but it's hard to get to that place.
So we know that you've worked in so many different genres and media. And first of all, how do you think your work in theater has impacted on this novel?
Well, my fiction writing, this is my third published novel. And I think my voice in fiction tends to be more dramatic than prosaic. And I think that that's because that's what I know. I'm not I read like crazy, but I'm not a literary person. I'm a theater person. And I think that, therefore, my characters are very, shall we say, flamboyant. And in my other books, too. They're people who are on the edge, they're brave, which people in the theater tend to be, slightly not in the center of things. And I think that the theater has impacted my novels because I am a thoroughly theater person, not a Broadway person, but a theater person, somebody who, from the time I was 5 years old, I have no idea what it's like not to be exaggerating or dramatic or gesturing or, I have no idea what it's like not to sympathize with somebody who's odd. That's a theater person. My other novels are like that too. They're not at all the same, but they have that quality.
I thought that maybe that's what lend or why you chose to create these two voices, that perhaps also was more theatrical.
No. I wanted to be inside their heads. One of my friends, who's a very good writer, told me that she thought it should be a play because the stuff was so good out loud, and somebody actually wanted to option it, and I don't know, without the West Side Highway and Israel, and I don't know how it would work. I don't know.
So, how do you begin? I mean, you have this idea. How do you select a medium? How do you decide how you're going to talk about what you want to talk about?
Well, everybody's different, and there's no one way. But there's a poet, I don't know if you probably have heard of him, a Russian poet named Osip Mandelstam. And Mandelstam, when he was going to write a poem, he'd lie down on the couch and he'd start humming. And that hum would become a poem. For me, it's very much the same thing. I don't think, You know, there are things going on in my head. I see pictures in my head. I hear voices, you know, and then I sit down and I say, well, I'm going to try this idea. And then whoop, it's there.
But why does it come out as a play or a piece of music or a novel?
Certain forms suit certain subjects. You know, if I wanted to write, I'd never write the Haggadah that's been written, you know. I'd never do Passover as a piece of prose, but to put it up with puppets and pageantry and all that, that seems right. As I said, to put this up as a play, as a musical, I don't know, it just seems weird to have a 14-year-old, you know, black transvestite singing songs. You know, maybe, given what people are doing, you know, Urinetown and all that stuff now, but it's not my style, you know. So I think the things just tell you what they are.
So is it at a conscious level that you make this decision?
No.
Or no?
I'm the most not conscious person. I get very conscious once the first draft is done. Then I get very specific. I do the research, you know. But the first draft of anything I do is
kind of an outpouring. So tell us about the process here, the writing of a novel. You said that this was your third novel?
Third, yeah.
The third. And since then, have you written?
Yes, I have a fourth novel, which is about twins, one of whom is a very, very famous painter, very famous, and she ODs, and it's about the twin who's left behind, who does a lot of different things but doesn't quite do anything, and has this enormous estate left to her by her famous sister. So it's all that kind of thing. And I have not been able to sell it. And the reason why I have not been able to sell it is because Flamboyant didn't sell enough copies. It got very good reviews. It really did very well. I was very pleased, but it didn't sell. And it sold enough to go into paperback, but then the paperback didn't sell enough. And what happens now is that if you don't sell enough, if you don't even get on the back list at a store, you know what the back list is, right? Well, there's the front list is what you see out front, and the back list is the stuff that's kind of there, but it's not featured, it's not new, right? And if you're not on the back list, then, you know, the publisher notes that, and if you don't make money for the publisher, you don't get published again. That's just a fact, especially now when there's all these amalgams of, you know, Empire Publishing, you know, Huge Publishing Incorporated, Monster Publishing Incorporated, buying Huge Publishing Incorporated, and, you know, everything. It's just it's a reality. Very hard time for novelists now. For first novelists, it's hell. For people like me, it's really hard. You have to practically do a different publisher for each book because the publisher says, I love you, but you didn't sell enough. So I have a children's book, strangely enough, that came out with Scholastic last year that did extremely well. And so I've got a second one that has already been bought. But with a novel, you know, it's very hard. It's very hard. So you keep writing them. And you hope someday that, you know, you keep sending them out. It's not a new story. It's not a new story. It's frustrating because I love writing, but, you know.
So tell us about this latest project that you were telling me about earlier with Wow.
Well, I have a few. One is in the Alley Theater in Houston, Texas, and it's about the life of a man named Alfred Jarry, who was a absurdist. He was the first absurdist in the late 1800s. He was like the first avant-garde. I mean, like he was doing in the late 1800s what Monty Python was doing during their time. And he was crazy, and he wrote a play called Ubu Wa, which was a play about a horrible, horrible, just gigantic fat king who ate everything and spit over everything and stole everything and killed people. I don't like you, you're dead. Like, off with your head. It's very, very funny play that is the precursor to Ionesco. And Artaud called his theater the Alfred Jarry Theater. And so I've written actually a big musical about that time, because during that time, Alfred Jarry was writing Ubu. There was also Edgar Allan Poe carrying on here, and there was Toulouse-Lautrec, and there was Eric Satie, and there was Rousseau, and Picasso was a very young person at that time. And all those people kind of wander through this piece. But really what it is this crazy guy. He was 4'9", and he wrote this play about this monster. So there's his life. Oh, and his best friend was the only famous French novelist of her time, and she wrote pornography, and she dressed in men's clothes. And so she's a wacko. She was married to one of the most important publishers of the time. So there's a huge group of people. And his life story gets told, but his character, Ubu, the play keeps interrupting and deconstructing the story of his life. And then his life starts to tear down Ubu. So it's really about that. And the thing about Ubu, another reason why I chose it, is because Ubu loves to wage war. Anything he could do to get a war going, he'll do it. Anything he could do to kill people, get weapons, blow things up, he will do it. He even has a thing called the debraining machine, where if he doesn't like you, he just puts you in the debraining machine, and your brain gets taken out and squashed. So I thought it was fitting. And so I'm doing that. I'm also doing a very interesting piece called Jewish Girls, which is with 14 Jewish adolescent girls and 2 women. And it's about them, really. It's about them, but it has to do with, the idea is that they come to a retreat on Shavuos, on Rosh Chodesh. That's the and half of them don't know what that is. And half of them do and don't care. And these 2 young rabbis, who are the women, these 28, 29-year-old rabbis, try to give them some sense of spirituality, and it's chaos. And it's a very interesting piece. It's going to be done at the JCC. And, I do a lot of different stuff. So that's a couple things.
Well, I want to wish you a lot of luck in everything that you do. And thank you so much for coming and talking to us. And
thank you for asking these questions.
Getting us so excited.
Yeah, well, the questions were good, because a couple of them I was going, I like that.
Were they provocative?
Yeah, they were like, well, not only were they provocative, they were hard. And I was like, okay.
Well, it was a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone. I'm sorry to send you back out in the cold, but we can't stay here overnight, I guess. But I'll see you all next time. It'll be warmer.
Thanks for listening. For more information on the 92nd Street Y, New York, and all of our programs, please visit us at 92ny.org.